The morning sun cast long shadows across the front yard as Colonel Jack Turner carefully hung the American flag on his newly installed flagpole. His movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. 20 years of military habit wasn't something that disappeared overnight. His weathered hands smoothed a wrinkle from the fabric as memories of distant deserts and mountain outposts flickered through his mind. 3 months ago, he'd still been wearing his uniform, commanding troops in combat zones. Now he wore faded jeans and a simple t-shirt that couldn't quite hide the outline of his military dog tags underneath. The transition to civilian life hadn't been easy, but this house, this small piece of America he could finally call his own, was supposed to be his fresh start. "Looks good, Colonel," called Mrs. Chen from next door, watering her roses. "It's nice to see that flag flying in the neighborhood." Jack nodded and waved. He'd chosen the Oak Ridge subdivision of Summerfield specifically for its quiet streets and friendly neighbors. After 20 years of chaos and military precision, he craved ordinary moments like this: morning greetings, the smell of fresh-cut grass, and the simple freedom to raise his country's flag without scanning the horizon for threats. Little did he know that the real threat would come from within his own neighborhood. Later that afternoon, while organizing his garage, another attempt to create order in his new civilian world, Jack heard the distinct sound of a car slowing down in front of his house. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows had pulled up, and a man in a polo shirt embroidered with Oak Ridge HOA stepped out, eyeing the flagpole with visible disapproval. "Can I help you?" Jack called out, setting down the box of tools he'd been sorting. The man turned, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I'm Ross, from the Homeowners Association. That flagpole wasn't approved by the Architectural Committee." He pulled out a clipboard. "According to our bylaws, all external modifications require prior approval." Jack wiped his hands on a rag. "The real estate agent said there wasn't an active HOA when I bought the place. Said it dissolved years ago." Something flashed across Ross's face, annoyance, perhaps, or something darker. "Well, your agent was mistaken. We've recently reorganized, and we're enforcing the original subdivision covenants." He handed Jack a paper. "This is a notice of violation. The flagpole needs to come down within 48 hours, or there's a $500 fine." Jack took the notice, military training keeping his face neutral despite the growing knot of suspicion in his gut. The letter had an official-looking stamp, but lacked any registration numbers or legal identifiers he'd expect from a legitimate organization. "I'll look into this," Jack said simply, neither agreeing nor refusing. Ross nodded curtly. "See that you do. We maintain standards in Oak Ridge." As he turned to leave, he added, "By the way, we've scheduled an assessment for new security measures. Each household will be billed $350 next month." That evening, as the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jack sat on his porch. The violation notice spread on the table beside a cup of coffee. 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq had given him a sixth sense for when something wasn't right. His instincts had saved his life and the lives of his troops more times than he could count. And right now, those instincts were screaming. He pulled out his phone and called his neighbor, Mr. Wong, who'd lived in Oak Ridge for 15 years. "HOA? No, that shut down back in 2018, Mr. Wong confirmed. Nobody wanted to serve on the board, and the covenants expired. Why do you ask?" Jack explained about Ross's visit. "They've been pulling this on new homeowners," Mr. Wong sighed. "Started about 2 years ago. Most people just pay to avoid trouble. My nephew is a lawyer. He says they have no legal authority, but they intimidate people, especially the elderly residents." Jack thanked him and hung up, his jaw tightening as he looked at his flagpole silhouetted against the darkening sky. The Purple Heart and Silver Star medals he'd earned hadn't come from backing down from bullies. 3 combat tours had taught him how to recognize an enemy. 2 decades of military intelligence have shown him how to gather information before striking. And years of protecting his troops had instilled in him a deep hatred of those who abused power. These fake HOA people had picked the wrong house to target. They just didn't know it yet. The next morning, Jack woke before dawn, a habit 20 years of military service had burned into him. As the coffee brewed, he spread the HOA violation notice on his kitchen table and studied it more carefully. The letterhead looked professional at first glance, but lacked any state registration numbers. The contact information was just a P.O. box and a cell phone number, no office address, no website. Something wasn't right. After breakfast, Jack walked around the neighborhood, nodding to early risers tending their gardens or retrieving newspapers. He stopped to help Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow, bring in her trash cans. "Thank you, dear," she said, catching her breath on her porch steps. "These old bones aren't what they used to be." "No problem at all, ma'am," Jack replied, setting the cans by her garage. "Actually, I was wondering if I could ask you something. This HOA that's been sending notices." Mrs. Patterson's face darkened. "Those people, they sent me a $200 fine last month because my roses grew 2 inches over the sidewalk." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm on a fixed income. I paid it because they threatened to put a line on my house." Jack's jaw tightened. "Do you still have the notice they sent you?" Inside her neat living room, Mrs. Patterson pulled out a folder stuffed with papers. "I keep everything," she explained, handing him several notices identical to his own. "My husband always said to keep records." Jack thanked her and continued his rounds, stopping to chat with other neighbors. By noon, he had heard similar stories from 6 different households. The so-called HOA had collected thousands in questionable fees and fines. Back home, Jack pulled out a notebook, another military habit, and started documenting everything he'd learned. The fake HOA had appeared about 2 years ago, shortly after the last original board member had moved away. They had no official records with the state or county. No one had ever seen their bylaws, though they quoted from them constantly. Most disturbing were reports that they conducted inspections at odd hours, sometimes wearing uniforms that resembled police gear. Jack's phone rang. It was Mr. Wom. "I spoke with my nephew," he said. "Legally, an HOA can't just restart itself after the covenants expire. They need new paperwork, new registration, and a formal vote by homeowners. None of that happened here." "Who are these people?" Jack asked. 3 guys who moved in around the same time. "The leader is this man Ross. He used to work as a mall security guard until he got fired. Lives in the big house on the corner with all the cameras. The others are his buddies. They drive around in matching cars, acting like they own the place." After hanging up, Jack walked to his front window and looked out at his flagpole. The American flag caught the afternoon breeze, a symbol of everything he had fought to protect. Freedom, justice, the rule of law, not bullies who preyed on their neighbors. The doorbell rang. Jack opened it to find Ross standing there with 2 other men. All 3 wore matching polo shirts with Oak Ridge enforcement embroidered above the breast pocket. "Colonel Turner," Ross said, his voice falsely pleasant. "I see the flagpole is still up." "It is," Jack replied calmly. "That's unfortunate." Ross handed him another paper. "This is your second violation notice. The fine is now $1,000. One of the other men stepped forward. He was shorter than Ross, but had a bodybuilder's thick neck and arms. "We take rule violations very seriously in Oak Ridge," he said, crossing his arms. "Some people think that being a veteran means they get special treatment." Jack looked at the man steadily, noting the bulge under his polo shirt that suggested a weapon. 20 years of facing down actual threats had left Jack immune to cheap intimidation tactics. "Interesting approach to community relations," Jack said mildly. "Do you usually threaten new homeowners, or am I getting special treatment?" Ross's smile vanished. "This isn't a threat, Colonel. It's community enforcement. We expect payment by Friday." He leaned closer. "And between us, that flagpole is coming down one way or another." As they walked away, Jack closed his door and went straight to his office. He pulled out his laptop and typed a quick email to an old friend at the FBI. Then he installed extra security cameras around his property. The fake HOA thought they were dealing with just another intimidated homeowner. They had no idea they'd just declared war on someone who had spent his entire adult life outthinking enemies far more dangerous than them. And Jack Turner was just getting started. 3 days after the confrontation, Jack sat in his living room with a dozen neighbors gathered around. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust motes in golden beams. As people settled into chairs and couches he hastily arranged in a circle. The room buzzed with nervous energy. "Thank you all for coming," Jack said, standing beside a whiteboard he'd set up. I know some of you were worried about being here." Mrs. Chen nodded, clutching her purse tightly. "They drive by my house 3 times a day since I questioned the special assessment. They put a note on my door saying my children were too loud," added a young father named Tom, bouncing a toddler on his knee. "Said they'd fine me $100 per noise complaint." One by one, they shared their stories. An elderly man had paid over $2,000 in fines for unapproved flowers. A nurse working night shifts had been harassed for leaving her porch light on. A retired teacher had received threats about her small vegetable garden being commercial agriculture. Jack wrote everything down, creating a timeline on the whiteboard. "This isn't just annoying," he explained, capping his marker. "It's illegal. They've collected over $200,000 from this neighborhood through intimidation and fraud." "But what can we do?" asked Mrs. Patterson, her voice shaking slightly. "They look so official with those badges and uniforms." Jack pointed to printouts he prepared. "Those aren't real badges. They ordered them online. The uniforms aren't official either. Real HOAs don't have enforcement officers. They send letters and can eventually take legal action, but they can't police the neighborhood." Mr. Wong raised his hand. "My nephew says we could all sue, but some folks can't afford lawyers." "We won't need to sue," Jack replied, his confidence catching everyone's attention. "I've contacted an old friend at the FBI, White-Collar Crime Division. She says what they're doing crosses several federal lines: mail fraud, impersonation of officials, extortion." A heavy-set man near the back crossed his arms. "No offense, but why would the FBI care about some neighborhood scam?" Jack turned to him. "Because they're not just taking money, they're creating a fake authority structure. My friend says they've seen this before, small-time criminals playing dress-up, but it can escalate quickly. People with fake badges sometimes start believing they have real power." The meeting continued for another hour as Jack outlined their plan. Everyone would document interactions, save notices, and report suspicious activity to a secure email address his FBI contact had created. No one would confront the fake HOA directly. As the neighbors filed out, Mr. Wong stayed behind. "You didn't tell them everything, did you?" he asked quietly. Jack shook his head. "They don't need to know about the guns. Not yet." On his laptop, Jack pulled up footage from his security cameras. 2 nights earlier, around 2 a.m., Ross and his friends had driven slowly past Jack's house. The camera caught the distinct outline of holsters under their jackets. "Playing a dangerous game," Mr. Wong murmured, peering at the screen. "That's the problem," Jack replied. "They don't know it's a game. People like this start believing their own lies." Later that evening, Jack sat on his back porch cleaning his service pistol, a legal weapon he kept properly stored. Military habits died hard, and regular maintenance was second nature. As he worked, he noticed movement at the edge of his property. Through the gathering dusk, he spotted someone in dark clothing slipping between houses. Jack quietly set the cleaning kit aside and moved inside, switching his security system to alert mode. He watched on the monitor as a figure approached his flagpole, carrying what looked like bolt cutters. Jack picked up his phone and called the real police. "This is Colonel Jack Turner. There's a trespasser on my property attempting to vandalize my flagpole. I have it on camera." While waiting for the police, Jack watched the trespasser struggle with the flagpole's halyard, trying to bring down the flag. The pole was military-grade aluminum, much stronger than the cheap decorative ones sold at hardware stores. The man grew frustrated, tugging harder. When patrol car lights flashed in front of the house, the trespasser ran, dropping the bolt cutters. Jack downloaded the security footage and waited on his porch. The responding officer seemed bored until Jack showed him the video. "Wait, isn't that the guy who claims to run the HOA?" the officer asked, suddenly interested. "One of them," Jack confirmed. "Been terrorizing the neighborhood for years." Jack led Wilson into his living room, every sense on high alert. The developer moved with the easy confidence of a man used to getting his way. He glanced around the modest home with barely disguised contempt. "Nice place," Wilson said, the words hollow. "Military pension must be treating you well." "I get by," Jack replied, gesturing to a chair. "Coffee?" "No, thank you." Wilson sat down, straightening his expensive suit jacket. "I prefer to keep this brief." I understand you're stirring up trouble over some HOA confusion. Jack stayed standing. Confusion? Is that what we're calling armed men impersonating officials? Wilson's smile tightened. Unfortunate misunderstandings. My associates can be overzealous. Your associates, Jack repeated. Interesting choice of words. Something flickered across Wilson's face, surprise, quickly masked. He hadn't meant to reveal that connection so easily. I have investments throughout the area, Wilson said smoothly. I hear things. People talk. Jack nodded toward his security camera. People do more than talk these days. Wilson followed his gaze to the small camera. For a moment, tension hung in the air. Let's speak plainly, Wilson finally said, leaning forward. This neighborhood is changing. Progress is inevitable. Fighting it only makes things harder for everyone. Progress? Jack asked. Is that what you call terrorizing elderly people out of their homes? Wilson's polished facade cracked slightly. I'm offering you an opportunity, Colonel. Smart men know when to make deals. What kind of deal? The developer pulled out a checkbook. Your house is worth, what, $240,000 in this market? I'll give you $300,000 cash. You walk away. Today, no questions asked. Jack crossed his arms. And if I say no? Wilson put the checkbook away. Then things get complicated. HOA violations can pile up. Liens happen. Legal fees mount. Sometimes properties face condemning issues, gas leaks, electrical problems. His voice hardened. Sometimes fires. Are you threatening me? Jack asked calmly. I'm explaining reality, Wilson replied. I've invested too much to let this neighborhood slip away because some war hero wants to play community organizer. Jack thought about the panic button in his pocket. One press and FBI agents would burst in. But they needed more, explicit threats, clear connections to the fake HOA. Tell me about Ross, Jack said. How much do you pay him to terrorize people for you? Wilson stood up abruptly. I don't know what you're talking about. We're done here. We're just getting started, Jack replied. The neighborhood meeting tomorrow night will be interesting. I've invited reporters, the police, maybe even the FBI. Wilson's face darkened. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I do, Jack said. Grant Wilson. 3 neighborhoods destroyed through fake HOA schemes. Money laundered through shell companies. And now this. The developer's composure crumbled. You can't prove anything. Ross is already talking, Jack lied, watching carefully. Showed the FBI everything. Payment records, text messages, your instructions about the lions. Wilson's hand moved toward his jacket pocket. Jack tensed, ready for anything. 20 years of combat had honed his reflexes. I wouldn't, Jack warned quietly. Wilson slowly pulled out his phone instead of whatever else might have been in that pocket. One call, and your problems multiply. I have friends in this town. People who make things happen. Make the call, Jack challenged. Wilson began dialing, but stopped when he heard a knock at the front door. Jack checked the security monitor. Perfect timing, he said with a slight smile. That'll be my guests. The door opened to reveal Lynn and 2 other FBI agents. They stepped inside, badges out. Grant Wilson, Lynn said. I'm Agent Reed, FBI. We'd like to ask you some questions about your involvement with a fraudulent homeowners association. Wilson's face went ashen. This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer. Feel free, Lynn replied. You might want to ask him about federal fraud charges, extortion, and conspiracy. She nodded toward Jack. We've been recording your conversation with Colonel Turner here. Wilson's eyes darted from Jack to the agents. You need warrants. This is entrapment. Actually, Lynn said, holding up a document, we have warrants. For your home, offices, and financial records. Teams are executing them as we speak. She turned to Jack. Mind if we continue this discussion at our office? Not at all, Jack replied. I think Mr. Wilson has more to share about progress and house fires. As the agents led Wilson out, Lynn hung back with Jack. That was risky, she whispered. He could have been armed. Jack nodded toward a drawer in the side table. So was I. The next evening, nearly 100 people packed the community center. Neighbors who had been victims of the fake HOA shared their stories. FBI agents explained the scheme and how Wilson had used Ross and the others to terrorize residents. The investigation is ongoing, Lynn told the crowd, but we've already frozen over $4 million in assets connected to this fraud operation. Her cheer went up. Mrs. Patterson wiped tears from her eyes. What about our money? Someone called out. The fines we paid. We're working to recover those funds, Lynn assured them, and there will likely be additional damages paid to victims. After the meeting, residents gathered in smaller groups, talking excitedly about next steps. Several approached Jack, thanking him for standing up when no one else would. Mr. Wong clapped him on the shoulder. You did good, Colonel. This neighborhood owes you. I just did what needed doing, Jack replied. 6 months later, on a bright spring morning, Jack stood in the same community center, watching as neighbors signed papers creating a real, legitimate homeowners association, not one focused on petty rules and fines, but on community improvement and support. The news had reported Wilson's guilty plea 2 weeks earlier. He would serve 10 years for fraud, conspiracy, and other charges. Ross and his companions received lesser sentences for cooperating. The money was being returned to the residents, with additional damages that would fund neighborhood improvements for years to come. Outside, Jack's flagpole stood tall, the American flag catching the breeze. Beside it now flew a new flag, one designed by the neighborhood children, showing houses with joined hands around them. Lynn joined in by the window. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to put up a flagpole. Jack smiled. Sometimes the right battles find you. So what's next? She asked. Back to retirement? Jack looked out at the neighborhood that had become his home. I think I'll stick around. The new HOA needs a security consultant. Lynn laughed. From war zones to homeowners associations. Quite a career change. Not really, Jack replied thoughtfully. It's still about protecting people, just a different kind of battlefield. As they walked outside into the sunshine, neighbors waved and called greetings. For a man who had spent his life in uniform, far from home, Jack had finally found where he belonged, not just a house, but a community worth fighting for. And that, he realized, had been worth every bit of the battle. Sunday morning broke with golden sunshine and birdsong. Jack was out early, the steady hum of his lawnmower joining the peaceful neighborhood sounds. He'd slept better than expected after the incident with the flagpole. 20 years in combat zones had taught him to grab rest when he could, regardless of circumstances. He was trimming along the edge of his driveway when a black SUV with tinted windows rolled to a stop in front of his house. The vehicle wasn't marked, but small lights flashed from behind the grille, the kind that people could buy online to mimic police lights. Jack straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead as 3 men climbed out. He recognized Ross immediately. The second man was the muscular guy from their previous visit. The third was new, tall, and thin with a clipboard and what looked like a camera around his neck. All 3 wore matching dark blue uniforms now. Not quite police uniforms, but close enough that an average person might be confused. They had patches on their shoulders reading HOA Enforcement Division and wore belt holsters partially hidden under untucked shirts. Jack switched off his lawnmower. The sudden silence felt heavy as the 3 men walked up his driveway in a triangle formation, Ross in the lead. Morning, gentlemen, Jack called out pleasantly, though his eyes missed nothing, the way they positioned themselves, their stiff postures, the nervous energy coming off them. Colonel Turner, Ross said, his voice carrying an official tone that hadn't been there before. We're here on official HOA enforcement business. Jack leaned on his lawnmower. Is that right? Ross pulled out what looked like a badge wallet and flipped it open. As authorized enforcement officers with jurisdiction inside Oak Ridge subdivision boundaries, we're responding to multiple complaints. Complaints about my lawn? Jack asked mildly. I'm cutting it right now. The muscular man stepped forward. This is about trespassing on HOA property, filing false police reports, and organizing illegal meetings. Jack raised an eyebrow. HOA property. False reports? I'm afraid you've lost me. The flagpole, Ross snapped, pointing. That area is within the community easement, and you filed a false report claiming someone attempted to vandalize it. That's interesting, Jack said, reaching for his water bottle. Considering I have video of someone trying to cut it down. Someone who looks exactly like your friend here. He nodded toward the muscular man, whose face flushed red. "Those cameras are unauthorized surveillance," the third man said, speaking for the first time. "Taking video of HOA officers is prohibited by Section 8, paragraph." "You're not officers of anything," Jack interrupted, his voice still calm but carrying the authority of someone who had commanded troops in battle. "There is no legal HOA here. You have no authority, no jurisdiction, and those aren't real badges. What you're doing is fraud, plain and simple." Ross's face darkened. "We have full authority to enforce community standards, including the power to remove unauthorized structures and issue citations." His hand drifted toward his hip. "I'm advising you to stand down and comply, Colonel." 20 years of combat experience had fine-tuned Jack's danger sense. He noted the subtle shift in stance, the hand movement, the escalating tension. These men had come looking for a confrontation. "I'm standing on my own property," Jack said evenly. "You're the ones who need to stand down." That's when everything changed. Ross pulled back his jacket and drew a handgun, pointing it at Jack. "I said stand down," he shouted, his voice cracking slightly. "On the ground. Now." The other two men looked shocked, clearly not expecting this escalation. The thin man with the clipboard took a step back. The muscular one froze. Jack didn't move. He'd stared down the barrels of guns carried by actual terrorists. Ross held his weapon like someone who'd watched too many movies. Improper grip, finger already on the trigger, stance all wrong. "You're making a huge mistake," Jack said quietly. "Put the gun away before this gets worse for you." "Don't tell me what to do," Ross shouted, waving the weapon. "I'm in charge here. This is my neighborhood." What Ross didn't notice was the small red light on Jack's porch, his security camera recording everything. What he also didn't know was that Jack had installed a special system after the flagpole incident, one that sent real-time footage to his FBI contact. "Last chance," Jack said calmly. "Put the gun down and leave. We can forget this happened." "On the ground," Ross repeated, taking a step closer. His face was flushed now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the mild morning. The gun trembled slightly in his hand. Jack slowly set down his water bottle. "You should know something," he said conversationally. "That camera on my porch is streaming everything to the FBI right now. Every word, every movement. That gun you're pointing at me, that's a federal offense." Ross's eyes flicked toward the porch, then back to Jack. Uncertainty crept into his expression. "He's bluffing," the muscular man said, finding his voice. "It's just a security camera." Jack smiled thinly. "Want to bet your future on that?" Before Ross could respond, the wail of approaching sirens cut through the morning quiet. In the distance, red and blue lights flashed, growing closer. The thin man dropped his clipboard. "I'm out," he said, turning to run. Ross stood frozen, the gun still pointed at Jack, indecision written across his face. The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. The sirens grew louder as Ross stood frozen, the gun still pointed at Jack. Sweat trickled down Ross's temple, his hand visibly shaking now. "Drop it," Jack said quietly. "You've got about 10 seconds before this gets much worse for you." The muscular guy backed away. "Man, this ain't worth it. Put it down." His voice cracked with panic. Ross's eyes darted between Jack and the approaching sirens. Finally, his arm lowered. The gun dropped to his side, but he didn't let go. 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt at the curb. 4 officers jumped out, weapons drawn. "Police, drop the weapon. Now." An officer shouted through a loudspeaker. Ross finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. The gun slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the driveway. He raised his hands slowly, face down on the ground. "All of you," the officer commanded. As the police secured the scene, a black sedan pulled up behind the cruisers. A woman in a business suit stepped out, flashing a badge at the officers. Her name was Agent Lynn Reed, Jack's FBI contact from years ago. While the police handcuffed Ross and his companions, Lynn walked up Jack's driveway, shaking her head. "When you said you had HOA trouble, I thought maybe they were overcharging you," she said, stopping beside him. "Not pulling guns on your lawn." Jack nodded toward his security camera. "Caught everything." "Crystal clear," Lynn confirmed. "Plus, we were already building a case before today's little performance. Your emails sent us down quite a rabbit hole." The police were reading rights to the three men now. The thin one was crying, while Ross stared blankly ahead, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. "Let's get inside," Lynn suggested. "My team will be here soon. We have a lot to talk about." In Jack's living room, Lynn spread files across his coffee table while officers took Jack's statement in the kitchen. The neighborhood had come alive with the commotion. Curious faces peeked from windows and porches. "So here's what we've pieced together," Lynn said when Jack joined her. "These three started small 2 years ago, fake violation notices, small fines. When people paid without question, they got bolder." She showed him bank statements, spreadsheets, photos. "They've collected over $350,000 from the neighborhood. Used it to buy those fake uniforms, the SUV, even took vacations." Jack leaned forward, studying a document. "And the guns?" "Ross has a permit, but carrying while impersonating law enforcement is a separate offense." Lynn tapped another file. "The other two aren't licensed at all, and we found evidence they conducted armed patrols at night." "I heard stories about that," Jack said. "Neighbors being confronted after dark, flashlights in their faces." Lynn nodded. "It's a pattern we've seen before. Small-time scammers who escalate into something more dangerous. Most fake HOAs just collect illegal fees. These guys were building their own private security force." A knock at the door revealed 2 more FBI agents with digital equipment. They quickly set up in Jack's dining room, downloading his security footage and scanning documents from neighbors who had started arriving with their HOA paperwork. Mrs. Patterson brought coffee and homemade cookies for everyone. Mr. Wong helped organize the growing pile of evidence. Tom, the young father, passed around a sign-up sheet for a neighborhood watch. A real one this time. In the kitchen, Lynn pulled Jack aside. "This all started with your flagpole, right? Why did they target you so aggressively?" Jack gazed out the window where his flag still flew. "I think they figured I'd be an easy target. New guy in the neighborhood, probably doesn't know the rules yet." "But you weren't," Lynn said with a small smile. "No," Jack agreed. "I wasn't." What he didn't say was how familiar this all felt. Different location, different enemy, but the same patterns. Throughout his military career, he'd faced people who used fear to control others. Whether in desert compounds or suburban neighborhoods, bullies operated the same way. Later that afternoon, Lynn and Jack sat on his porch, watching FBI agents photograph the dropped gun where it had fallen. "You know, we never would have caught this without you," Lynn said. "Most people just pay to avoid conflict." Jack shrugged. "I've had enough conflict for one lifetime, but some things are worth standing up for." "Like a flagpole?" she asked. "Like a community," Jack corrected her. "These people deserve to feel safe in their homes." Lynn's phone buzzed with a text. "Team just finished at Ross's house," she reported. "Found everything, fake HOA documents, letterhead, stamps, financial records. Even counterfeit property line paperwork they were preparing." "Lions?" Jack asked sharply. "Apparently the next phase of their plan. File fake liens against properties, then threaten foreclosure unless people paid settlement fees." Lynn shook her head in disgust. They were days away from starting. Jack thought about Mrs. Patterson and the other elderly residents who might have lost their homes to this scheme. "What happens now?" he asked. "Federal charges for all 3. Mail fraud, wire fraud, impersonating officials, extortion, weapons charges. They'll be going away for a long time." Lynn stood up, gathering her files. "We'll need you to testify, of course." "I'll be there," Jack promised. As evening fell and the FBI team finally packed up, neighbors lingered on Jack's lawn, talking quietly among themselves. For the first time since he'd moved in, Jack felt truly part of this community. The neighborhood had been under siege, not from an outside threat, but from within. And just like in his military days, Jack had done what came naturally: assessed the situation, gathered intelligence, and protected those who couldn't protect themselves. His phone buzzed with a text from Lynn. "There's more to this story. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office. This goes deeper than we thought." Jack looked up at his flag, now illuminated by a spotlight as darkness fell. Whatever came next, he was ready. The FBI office hummed with activity as Jack followed Lynn through the security checkpoint. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes in the air. Despite the early hour, the place buzzed like a beehive. "Coffee?" Lynn asked, leading him into a conference room where maps and photos covered one wall. "Please," Jack said, his eyes drawn to the display. He recognized his neighborhood aerial view with red marks on certain houses. His own home had a big red circle. Lynn handed him a steaming mug. "So, remember when I said this goes deeper? We spent all night connecting dots." Another agent entered, carrying a laptop. "The surveillance footage is ready," he said, nodding to Jack. "Colonel." They dimmed the lights and projected images onto a blank wall. Jack watched footage from various security cameras, some from neighbors' houses, others from businesses near the subdivision entrance. "We backtracked 6 months," Lynn explained. "Look at these patterns." The video showed the fake HOA's black SUV following specific residents. Mrs. Patterson coming home from church. Mr. Wong leaving his medical appointments. The young father Tom picking up his kids from school. "They were tracking people," Jack murmured. "Not just tracking," Lynn corrected, selecting targets. She clicked to another screen showing a spreadsheet. "They categorized every house in the neighborhood. Look at the labels." Jack leaned forward, reading, "Easy mark. Potential problem. Won't fight back. Too connected." His own house was labeled, "Remove ASAP." "They were planning to drive you out from day one," Lynn said. "You were too much of a wild card. Military background, no family to pressure, too many potential connections." "But why target this neighborhood at all?" Jack asked. "It's not exactly wealthy." Lynn exchanged glances with the other agent. "That's where this gets interesting." She pulled up property records on the screen. "The neighborhood sits on land that's suddenly become very valuable. A tech company is quietly buying property for a new campus. Land prices will triple once the announcement goes public." Understanding dawned on Jack. So the fake HOA was laying groundwork to acquire properties through their fake lion scheme, Lynn finished. Get people to abandon their homes or sell cheaply under threat of foreclosure. Jack sat back, processing this information. Who's behind it? Ross doesn't seem smart enough for this. "You're right," Lynn agreed. "Follow the money." She clicked to another screen showing bank transfers. The HOA account feeds into shell companies owned by a local developer named Grant Wilson. Jack recognized the name. "The guy building those luxury condos downtown." Lynn nodded. "The same. Wilson's company had applied for permits to redevelop your entire subdivision 2 years ago, but homeowners voted it down. So he created this fake HOA to terrorize people into leaving. Ross and his buddies were just hired muscle," the other agent added. Lynn pulled out a folder. "Wilson paid them well. Ross got $5,000 a month plus a percentage of all collected fines. The others got $3,000 each." Jack shook his head in disgust. All this to force people from their homes. "It gets worse," Lynn said grimly. "Wilson has done this before in 2 other neighborhoods. We just never connected the dots until now." She showed him news articles about other communities where homeowners had fled after HOA disputes, neighborhoods that were later demolished for Wilson's developments. "What happens now?" Jack asked. Lynn smiled. "That's why we called you in. We need your help." The plan they laid out was both simple and elegant. Instead of arresting Wilson immediately, they would use his own scheme against him. The FBI wanted to catch Wilson directly instructing his fake HOA team, proving he was the mastermind. "We've got Ross to cooperate," Lynn explained. "He's facing 20 years otherwise. He's agreed to wear a wire to his next meeting with Wilson." "Where do I come in?" Jack asked. "We need a reason for that meeting to happen urgently," the other agent said. "Something big enough that Ross needs direct instructions." Jack understood immediately. "Something like me organizing the neighborhood against them." "Exactly," Lynn confirmed. "We want you to call a community meeting, make it public, put up flyers, make enough noise that Ross has to report to Wilson." Jack considered the plan. "I can do better than that. Let's announce we're forming a real, legitimate HOA, one that will expose the fraud." Lynn grinned. "Perfect. Wilson won't be able to ignore that." They spent the next hour planning details. Jack would organize a neighborhood-wide meeting in 3 days. The announcement would go out that afternoon. Every step designed to trigger panic in Wilson's organization. As they wrapped up, Lynn handed Jack a small device. "Panic button. just in case. We'll have agents nearby, but Jack pocketed it. I've handled worse than real estate developers. Don't underestimate him, Lynn warned. Wilson's connected. He's dangerous. On his way out, Jack passed a wall of photos, past cases the FBI had solved. He paused at one showing a burned-out house. The caption read, "Austin linked to development fraud." Lynn noticed his attention. Like I said, dangerous. Back in his neighborhood, Jack went door to door, personally inviting everyone to the community meeting. He placed flyers on bulletin boards and taped them to mailbox clusters. Neighborhood alert, forming new legitimate HOA to combat fraud. All homeowners must attend. He made sure to be visible, particularly when the black SUV crept past his house that afternoon. Jack even waved at them, holding a stack of flyers deliberately in view. That evening, his doorbell rang. Jack checked his security monitor, expecting Ross or another fake HOA member. Instead, he found a well-dressed older man on his porch. Expensive suit, silver hair, confident posture. Jack opened the door, instantly alert. "Colonel Turner." "I'm Grant Wilson." The man extended his hand with a practiced smile. "I understand you're organizing some kind of homeowners meeting." Jack's face revealed nothing as he shook the hand of the man who had orchestrated the entire scheme. "That's right," he replied calmly. "Would you like to come in and discuss it?" Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I think that would be very productive." As Jack stepped aside to let the developer enter, he felt the weight of the panic button in his pocket. The trap was set, but he hadn't expected the prey to walk so willingly into the spider's web. The game had suddenly changed.